Greetings and welcome to Culinary Arts, Unit 4, Stock, Sauce and Soup. So in the previous session, we were discussing on different types of stocks. For example, we were discussing on vegetable stock, white stock, brown stock and fish stock. So in today's session, let's try and understand what are the methods of preparations for cooking the stock, its storage, and few glossary terms that is used in food and beverage production, especially in kitchen. So what exactly is and how do you cook a stock? So, if you remember the previous session, we were always discussing that a stock should always be started with the cold water. It should be simmering in heat, and also it should not be boiling when you're cooking a stock. So, the reason why it has been told like that is because when you're making a brown stock, which includes meat and bones of a meat, the impurities can be formed on the top of the stock when you simmer it, but when you're boiling a stock, the impurities get dissolved in the stock, which actually brings out an unclear or not so pure formation of a stock. For that reason, we should always know what are the proper temperature and proper method of cooking a stock. Now, rule number one is stocks are generally simmered and never boiled. Please remember a stock should always be simmered. When I say simmered, the flame has to be very low. It should not be at high temperature or a high flame, because when it's at high flame, the stock starts boiling. So it should always be simmered. The reason why it has to be simmered is because to extract the maximum flavor out of the stocks. And rule number two is the stock should always be started with the cold water. That is, in the cold water, you take a pan, you add the cold water, you add all the ingredients, and then only it has to be brought to a simmering flame, a simmering consistency. Because when after the water is being heated and then you add the ingredients, so you don't get as much as flavor as it has been done in the previously. So always it has to be started in the cold water and should always be simmered. Next one is that now the bones are sometimes roasted with mirepoix. So if you remember the brown stock, always the bones, tomato puree and certain mirepoix. Mirepoix is a term used for cuts of vegetables which is roughly cut. So when all these together, it's been roasted until it has been formed brown in color, and only then it is added to the cold water and it is brought to a boil or simmering. So, so mirepoix of a certain stocks, especially brown stocks, the mirepoix along with the bone is being roasted together to get a maximum flavors out it, and then blanched in water and rinsed for a clearer and lighter stocks. Vegetables, herbs, and spices are usually added after the water is being simmered, because it should not be over pungent of the flavors. It's just that the spices and herbs are added to bring the freshness in the liquid. That's the reason it should be added post after some time. Once it's been simmered, only then you can add the spices, herbs, and certain vegetables, usually added in the end. Now this, once this cooked is being cooked liquid, it has been strained. It has been strained because in case there's impurities or we don't want the vegetables or the bones of the meat, so only the water is what we call it as a stock, the flavorful liquid. So it has been strained out. Either it has been used immediately for certain soups or stocks or sauces, or it can be refrigerated. It can also be frozen, and then as and when it has been required, a certain quantity it has been taken out, and then it has been reheated and is used for various dishes. For example, it is majoritively used in soups and in sauces as well. Now, always a certain points to be remembered. Always use a tall pot so that you can prevent the water evaporation. So if you're using a small pan, what happens? The water gets evaporated very quickly. So always use a tall pot so that the water cannot escape, the water vapor cannot escape easily. And always blanch and sweat or brown the soup or the mirepoix before using it based on what kind of a stock is being required. Always start the stock with the cold water so that it can heat it up, and in case of any impurities, it can actually form a layer on top which can be cleared it out, and only then you get a clear stock. For ultimate clarity, the skin of the impurities from the surface can be taken out. Avoid a cloudy stock and do not keep stirring it continuously, because when you keep stirring the stock continuously, the meat, the vegetables get smashed up, and instead of getting a clear stock, you might get a cloudy appearance of stock. And always replenish the liquid if needed and evaporate, but avoid diluting the flavor. The stock that has been made once, you can take out the liquid and the remaining ingredients that is there. Again, you can add water and again you can bring it to boil to extract the maximum flavors of it. So this can also be done, and the term that is being used is called as remoulage. Simmer the stock gently and never allow the stock to boil. Strain the stock using either a china cap or even a strainer or even a cheesecloth, and cool the stock quickly, or you can also use it immediately in case if you're making certain soups or certain sauce. Now, there's certain cooking time that has to be kept in mind. Not all the stocks can be cooked as per the desired time. There's certain rules that has to be followed. Vegetable and fish stock can be only simmered and cooked for 45 minutes. White stock or the poultry stocks can be cooked for at least 2 to 4 hours. And if you have the a meat stock, that is brown stock, or any beef or any brown meat stock, it can go up to 8 hours. So this is a cooking time. Because brown meat is very tough, it is not as tender as white chicken meat, so it requires more cooking time so that the flavors and the marrows can be extracted out from the bones. Whereas fish bone is very small, it is very lean, so just 45 minutes of time is more than enough. Vegetables, again, 45 minutes to prepare a stock of vegetable stock is again the 45 minutes. Fish, or let's say poultry, that is chicken, the bones are very small, so just 2 to 4 hours is maximum enough for poultry or white stock. Now, there are certain thickening agent added to the stock for the further preparations. In next session, we will be understanding about what are the thickening agents that is being used. So the next one you have is something called remoulage, glaze, and reduction. Remoulage is basically a term that is used once a first flavor of the stock is being boiled, and then again you remove out the liquid with the same remaining ingredients that is left over in the pot. Again you add the water and again you bring it to the boiling, is called as remoulage. Now, when the stock is being reduced until a very high concentrated liquid, it is called as the glaze. Next one, we'll understand the tips to be improve our stock. Always cut the bone to 2 inches to 3 inches to maximize the flavors and reduce the cooking time. For meat stocks, especially add gelatinous cuts, like for example, veal or pork feet, to contribute for the more rich flavor. So these bones of especially pork and beef, they are actually used for making a byproduct of gelatin, because the bones, the proteins present in these bones are basically a gelatin, which kind of becomes like a jelly in appearance when it is cooked for a longer period of time, and the consistency of the stock has been reduced to a reduction or a glaze mode. So always using these feet of a veal or feet of the pork, it kind of gives more gelatinization, and hence your stock can be more thicker, which can be used for your sauces as well. Veal bones are too expensive for the kitchen budget. Substitute with chicken or turkey bones, which is very similar and more versatile. And make sure the balance of the ingredients and the flavors is goes well. Please do not add any extra ingredients where the stock flavor can be either too pungent or it can be unflavorful as well. So always understand the quantity that has to be used. Herbs and spices and prolongs cooking method, what happens, it loses its flavor. Sometimes the spice, when you cook for a longer period of time, it can give out the maximum flavor and it can become overpowering. Avoid adding salt if reducing the stock, because any which ways the stock can be used for many other preparations. So the salt can be balanced out. And for brown stock, always caramelize the vegetables and bones before adding into the cold water. Do not add too much of water because it can dilute the flavor, and always simmer the stock, not boiling, and avoid adding salt. And next one, uh, you can just use a quantity of the ingredients that is there in the stock for maximum 1 or 2 times because first flavor, first kind of a stock has been extracted. For the remoulage, that is the second time. When you keep on using the same ingredient and keep on boiling with 2 or 3 fresh water, then you will not get the maximum flavor as expected in the first or second stock that has been extracted. There are certain glossary terms. For example, you have bouillon. Bouillon is basically a liquid that is derived from a simmering of ingredients with water. It is very similar to stock, but here in bouillon, lots of vegetables and even the meat is also added. Meat and bones have also been added. Broth is basically a liquid from simmering meat, mirepoix, herbs and spices. Then you have brown stock, fish stock, white stock, poultry, and you also have vegetable stocks as well. So these are the different types of stock which has already been discussed. Then you have court bouillon. Court bouillon is also called as a shortcut method of the stock. It is actually cooked for a less time and majority of ingredients are added like lime or lime juice, vinegar or even wine to increase the flavor of the stock. Then you have the essence, you have remoulage, glaze, and the last one is the estouffade. What is estouffade? Estouffade is basically another term that is used for the brown stock. And here the bones of the veal or the beef is used. And this estouffade is actually you can add a little bit of red wine and it is basically used for glazing of beef steak or it is also used for making a sauce preparation. Next one we have is the, now before we step into understanding what is a soup, classifications of sauce and how is a sauce made, there is one cooking method where everyone should know before we step into these further sessions. So that is nothing but thickening agent. Now, when you tried eating a soup, you can know some soup are very thick, like for example, mushroom soups, tomato soups. There's some soup that is very liquid in consistency. Some sauce, they're very thick in consistency. Some sauce, they're very liquid in consistency. So the adjusting the consistency from thick to thin, there's certain agents that has been added inside it, which is nothing called as thickening agents. So let's try and understand what is thickening agent that it comes in session 4.3. So here you'll be understanding about different types of thickening agent that is used for sauce and soups, and you'll be understanding what are the method of preparation of these thickening agent. Now, beyond the flavor, beyond the soup or beyond the sauces that is being prepared, you should always understand what is the property that has been added to in order to increase the thickness consistency in the soup and sauces. Sometimes when you're adding these thickening agent, you can also get a glossy kind of an appearance on the soup or on the sauce as well. So this thickening agent is nothing but there are certain ratios that has been added. Thickening agents are classified into many categories. Like for very example, if you're making a shorba, that is a tomato soup, okay, tomato shorba in Indian cuisines, we add a thickening agent like a basin flour. Okay. Similarly, when we're making a cream of mushroom soup or cream of tomato soup, we add a thickening agent like we add a roux or sometimes we add the slurry. So we will understand what are these. Before these, we should understand how much of thickening agent to be added for soup. The ratio goes as such. You have 16, that is you have certain ratios which include 16 is to 2 is to 1. Okay, so we will understand what are the ratios and there are certain terms that is being used. So we'll understand what are the different types of thickening agent. First one, that is ROUX, it is called as roux. You pronounce it as roux. Roux is basically 1 is to 1. That means equal part of flour and butter that has been added and you add 10 times of liquid, that is milk, is being added or any stock can be added to form a thickening agent. This is called as a roux. So roux is basically you have different categories of roux. You have white roux, you have a cream, and then you also have the brown roux. So the more you cook the flour and butter, the more the browner it becomes. For example, for white stock, for white soup or white stock or white soup or white sauces, we use white roux, which is just frying of slightly tossing the flour and butter. If you want to make a brown stock, then we use a brown roux where we again toss the brown flour and butter until it turns to like nutty flavor and light brown in color, and then the liquid is being added. So this is what the consistency of the roux is. Next one is called as liaison, that is Liason. Liaison is very simple. So this is a second thickening agent that is being added. That is, we have the egg yolk and cream. There is certain ratio that I explained you. The ratio is nothing but 16:1:1. So 16 will be the liquid, 1 will be the yolk, and 2 times of that is where you add the cream. So what you do is you take a small container, you add the egg yolk because egg yolk is very rich in fat. It is also used as a thickening agent. To that you add the cream, you nicely blend it, and then you add the 16 times of that is what you add the liquid. It can be the stock, and then you mix it along and you bring it to boil, and that is how the soup becomes very thick. So this is called as Lysol. Next one you have is the whitewash. What is whitewash? Whitewash is nothing but flour and water. So here, when you're using a corn flour, when you're using a corn starch, it's very similar. When you add water and cornstarch, the term that we use is called as slurry. We use it as slurry. It's basically used for making sauce and soups. So we just mix a corn flour and water, and then we add it into a hot boiling soup or stock, and then we mix it together until the mixture becomes very thick. This is called as slurry. Next one you have is beer meunier. Now, what is beer meunier? Beer meunier is also called as a lazy chef roux. So we all know what is roux. That is flour and butter, which is cooked together in a pan. Roux is very similar. You take flour and butter, but you do not cook it. You make it into a very fine paste, and then this paste is being added to a hot liquid. That is what you call it as a beer meunier. Next one you have is a cornstarch, especially if you see when you're making some sauces, when you're making some soups at home, we add cornstarch and we add water, and then we sometimes add it in the soup. Whitewash is nothing but cornstarch and flour, normal flour like your all-purpose flour or maida. We add it, mix it together, and we use it for soup and sauces, which is used as thickening agent. Now, what happens to these flour? Flour is very rich in gluten formation. So what happens when you add these cornstarch, or when we add this cornstarch to the hot liquid, the flour becomes gelatinization. That is, the flour molecules, it absorbs the water and it becomes very thick. So that process is called as gelatinization. And when it becomes very swollen up, that is how the thickening process of a liquid starts. So this is called as gelatinization. And when it becomes gelatinization, the the liquid or the soup or the stock, it tends to become more thick. Apart from cornstarch, you can also use arrowroot. What is arrowroot? Arrowroot is basically obtained from a root of a plant, where again it is used as a thickening agent. It is very fine as compared to corn flour. Is first of all very soft and very fine. So this arrowroot is even more softer and finer than that. It is again mixed with certain water or liquid, and then it is formed into a slurry and then added to a stock or the sauces. Last one is a tapioca starch. Tapioca, what is a tuber form? So this tapioca is again very rich in starch content. So this has been dehydrated. It is formed into a powder form called tapioca starch. It is mixed along with the liquid, and then it is added into a soup or it is added into the stock as well. Next one we have is the guar gum. Now what is guar gum? Guar gum is basically a pod kind of a plant, guar plant, or it has a pod in it. So it is basically used as a thickening agent, especially if you want to make ice creams, especially for the dessert sauces as well. Guar gum is used. So this guar gum is basically obtained from guar bean, which is mostly found in India, and it is much stronger thickening agent. So that's the reason it's widely used in pastries, especially for ice creams or any desserts formation, and it is very rarely used for stocks, sauce, and soups. Next one we also have is farine, which is also called as the flour in French word. Sometimes just adding flour to the sauce or stocks, it again becomes very thick. So these are the thickening agent. Apart from this, we also have is the food grade gums. Like for example, in retail shops, you just get a corn flour or you get this custard powders. So this is just in ready to use. use where you get it, you can add it in a dessert sauce, you can add it in certain soups as well, where it kind of increases the thickness of the food. Apart from this, we also have as a setting agent, just like how gelatin cannot be used for sauce or stock or soup, but when we're making dessert sauce or when we're using certain desserts, if you want to set the dessert, if you want to make it more thick, and if you want to set it, like for example, if you want to have a jelly, so gelatin is used. Gelatin, understand, it is obtained from the bones of pork and bones of beef, which is being used, it is being powdered form, and then it is being used as a gelatin. So this is again used as a setting agent. So they are, apart from this, if you want the veg version, we call something as agar agar. Agar is nothing but again a setting agent where you can make a jelly out of it, but it is obtained from the seaweed. It's also called as China grass. It is very crystal in color. It is added in the hot water. It is cooked along with ingredients, and it is being frozen where you get like a jelly in consistency. So these are the certain setting agents which is used in either sauce, stock, or it's also used in soups as well. So in next session, we will understand what are the different types of soup, different types of sauces, and also the desserts that is being used. Thank you.